recording. So here's a nice case study, nice and long case study, right? So let's read through this and then we'll do the questions related to this. Okay, can you see my screen? Students, can you see my screen? And this is, can you explain long run aggregate supply at the end of the class? Definitely I can. Okay, perfect. Let's get started, students. So this is May-June 2017, right? And the case study is this. Okay, the miraculous story of Iceland. Now, what is this saying? Okay, indices of the national output of Iceland and the Republic of Ireland, right? Iceland and the Republic of Ireland, 2007 to 2014, right? Okay. Now this full-fledged line is for Iceland, right? And the other one is for Republic of Ireland, ROI, right? Okay. Now this is the national output, which is basically the GDP, right? So both started off with 100. Then for Iceland, you know, it went a little up, then it fell up, and it ended a little bit above 100, 101.1. For the Republic of Ireland, it fell, right? It fell, and then it closed below 100, right? Okay, now moving on, inflation. Think about this. Next thing it shows you is inflation. Inflation in Iceland between 2007 and 2015, right? Okay, now annual rate of inflation percentage, right? And this is 2007 to 2015. And wherever you have a star, so 2013, 2014, and 2015 is a star, which means it's an estimate. Okay, now this being said, we'll move on and read the case study. Okay, as a result of financial crisis 2007 and 2008, both Iceland and the Republic of Ireland had to seek help from the IMF, International Monetary Fund. In total, we did that. Okay, I'll tell you when we come to the question. We'll talk about that. Right? Okay, think about this. Now, the best thing is that we do a question. So I'll find a question after this about balance of payments and inflation, right? And I'll we will apply all of that knowledge in that question, right? Just give me a second. Okay, now students, what's next? What is this saying? Okay, just give me a second. Okay, now think about this. So in total, Iceland borrowed the US dollars 4.6 billion with US dollar 2.1 billion of that coming from the IMF, right? So Iceland borrowed how much amount? $4.6 billion. And out of that, 2.1 billion came from the IMF. And the other 2.5 billion from neighboring Scandinavian countries, right? In exchange for help, Iceland was forced to sharply reduce government spending, right? In exchange for help, Iceland was forced to sharply reduce government spending, introduce more austerity than the Republic of Ireland did. Not only that, but Iceland also increased interest rates to 18% in the immediate aftermath of the crisis to reduce inflation. So they increased interest rates, right? Did we talk about that? So one way to control inflation, think about this. One way about that you need to remember that what do they do? To control inflation, there are basically two things that you can do, right? So one is to have higher taxes. That is one effective way to control inflation. Another way to control inflation is to use more interest rates, higher interest rates, right? So these are two ways of controlling inflation, right? Okay, now this being said, we'll move on, right? Okay, it gradually cut, right? It gradually cut interest rates afterward, but it was not until 2011 that they fell to 4.2%, right? Now, what is this paragraph talking about? This paragraph is talking about what happened, it's talking about two countries, Iceland and Republic of Ireland, and they took loan from IMF, right? Now, Iceland took loan of $4.6 billion, out of which 2.1 billion came from IMF and the remaining came from neighboring Scandinavian countries. In exchange for help, Iceland was forced to sharply reduce government spending. So whenever you take a loan, by the way, do you guys know that IMF imposes some conditions that countries have to follow? So in this case, what was the condition imposed by IMF? That you will reduce government spending, right? Not only did, but Iceland also increased interest rates to 18% in the immediate aftermath of the crisis to reduce inflation. It gradually cut interest rates afterward, but it was not until 2011 that they fell to 4.25%. The biggest difference between two economies is that Iceland has its own currency, the krona, right? Wow. Iceland has its own currency, krona. Iceland manages its foreign exchange rate through intervention in the foreign exchange market and through interest rate changes. Iceland manages. Now, what type of exchange rate they're using? Managed exchange rate, because it clearly gives you the hint. Iceland manages its foreign exchange rate through intervention in the foreign exchange market and through interest rate changes. Insufficient foreign exchange reserves meant that the value of krona fell by nearly 60% between the end of 2007 and the end of 2008. The Republic of Ireland, on the other hand, did not have its own currency that it could devalue, right? So what currency ROI is using? Republic of Ireland. What currency would ROI be using? Any guess, students? It is part of Eurozone, where each country uses euro and the Republic of Ireland authorities have no control over its value. We know that. When you're part of euro currency, right? Very good, perfect. When you're part of Eurozone, then there's one central bank and one country alone cannot appreciate or depreciate euro, right? Okay, now moving on, students. Moving on, right? Okay, now Iceland recovery has been better than Republic of Ireland, despite the fact that Iceland's recession was much more serious than Republic of Ireland. The Icelandic economy was recovering surprisingly strong since 2010. The large devaluation of krona against the US dollars and euro helped. There has been a big boost from tourism. Unemployment, which peaked at 9% of the workforce at the worst of the crisis, is now back to 5%, right? So the one time the unemployment rose to 9%, now it's back to 5%. In the Republic of Ireland, unemployment is falling, but is still 9.8% of the workforce. Iceland's economy has now recovered roughly to its pre-crisis peak, right? So they have almost come back to because we can see, yes or no? Did we see this or not? Because now, if you see the graph, that is what I said exactly, right? So both countries started off with 100 and Iceland has already passed 100. Iceland has already passed 100. This means they are a little bit higher than what they were during COVID. So sorry, COVID, I'm saying during recession, right? So this was the slump depression, but now they're slightly above. Whereas Republic of Ireland is still down at the, they haven't fully recovered. Is this making sense, students? Okay, now this being said, Iceland economy has now recovered roughly its pre-crisis peak. The IMF predicts that Iceland output will grow by 3.5% this year. The current account deficit, which was 25% national income in 2009, has been eliminated and there is now a current account surplus. The government has also ran a budget surplus last year for the first time since the crisis. Right? Are we good on this? So this is what is provided to us in the question. Okay, now we move on. After you read the case study, you move on and you read the questions one by one and start answering. Okay, no problem. I hope this is working fine for you now. Use production possibility curve to compare the changes in the output of the Republic of Ireland and Iceland shown in figure 1. Use production possibility curve to compare the changes in the output of ROI and Iceland shown in figure 1, right? Shown in figure 1. Okay, now think about this. So what will you do? How do we show? Right? So the question is saying that use production possibility curve to show the changes in the output for the two countries, right? So one is Iceland and the other one is Republic of Ireland, right? Or we can just simply use the word Ireland, right? And on the production possibility curve, we know it's a graph that shows the maximum output that a country can produce in terms of two goods. So you can name any two goods, good X and good Y. Similarly, On this graph as well, you will have good Y on the Y-axis, good X on the X-axis, right? And then we can just show normal downward sloping production possibility curve in this case, and normal downward sloping production possibility curve in this case. Okay, now think about it, students. What happened? Iceland has production possibility curve. Okay, think about this. What is PPC? Production possibility curve is a graph that shows maximum output that a country can produce in terms of two goods. Is a graph that shows maximum output by the way, this is something very basic. At this stage, I didn't expect this. Shows maximum output. Is a graph that shows maximum output that a country can produce in terms of two goods. Produce in terms of two goods, right? So have a look at this. So this graph shows. No. You don't have to explain PPC. No. You just need to, because it's a case study question. It's not an essay question. Essay questions you have to, otherwise you don't. No. Rightward shift for Iceland and leftward shift for PPC for ROI. Okay, think about this. Now this is where it becomes interesting. Think about it, Abdurrahim. So rightward shift means that you have discovered more resources. So the PPC of a country shifts outwards when you have discovered more resources, right? In this case, there isn't any increase or decrease in the production potential. Now listen to me very carefully, students, because this is a point that a lot of students get confused with. Think about this. We said PPC always shift outwards when there's increase in production potential. What things increase the production potential of a country? Like you have discovered more resources, your labor has become more efficient, there's more productivity, more technology, blah, 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 blah. And similarly, it shifts inwards when opposite thing happens, right? When opposite thing happens, like for instance, some natural disaster or some earthquake or something of the sort, right? So this is what it shows. Now, the thing is that in this case, there hasn't been any increase or decrease in the production potential. Instead, think about this. So this was, let's say, pre-recession in Ireland. No, Ireland didn't recover. Which of the two countries have recovered? I have to confirm. Iceland has recovered. So think about it. Iceland has already recovered. This means, now listen to me very carefully. If Iceland was already operating on its maximum production potential, this is pre-recession. Now, during recession, what happened? During recession, their output fell. Students, now please follow me very closely, right? So during recession, their output fell, which means that during recession, obviously they were producing less. So before recession, let's say they were making this many units of, this many units of good X, this many units of good Y. And after, after recession, obviously the output decreased. So they were producing less of both. Right? Okay. It moves to a point and exactly, but since they have already, now there's a small problem with that. There's a small problem. We shouldn't have drawn it on the graph, right? So since they have already recovered the entire, so let's say it was over here, right? So since they have already recovered, and just a second. Arbab, are you getting me? Right? So since they have already recovered, right? So they have in fact moved a little. So during recession, they moved in, right? From point A to point B. But now since they've almost all, completely recovered, So now they are at point C. In fact, point C is a little higher than A. Why is point C a little higher than A? Because you can see for yourself that before recession, your that thing was, how much was the output of each country? 100. And now Iceland's output is slightly higher, 101.1. How many of you are getting me over here? Students, are you getting me or not, right? So now they have moved a little, very minor, but a little higher than what they were, right? So you can say that A is your pre-recession, before recession, this is where you were, right? During recession. So you can also make a small, key like this. So this is pre-recession, B is during recession, and C is after recession. During recession, and C is after recession. Easy? Is it making sense? Students, anything that anyone did not understand. So C, you can make C a little bit higher than this, right? And sorry about if the drawing is not very clear, right? Clear? Okay, very good, very good. Excellent, students, excellent. Okay, now for the island, think about this. For the island, it would be same. So this is where they were before recession. This is where they went to during recession, and now they haven't fully recovered. Now they are at C. Are you getting me, students? So when before recession they were making, at point A. So this much was your output, right? Which is the highest, right? Then what happened during the session? The output obviously fell. So that came down to point B. And then after the session, they did recover a little bit till C, but they haven't fully recovered. How do we know they haven't fully recovered? Who can tell me? How do we know? How do we know they haven't fully recovered? Because that is not even 100. That is 97.8. So that is below where they were, because pre-recession it was both 100, right? Is everyone clear on this? So students, this is exactly what the question was asking for. And then you can also explain in words. I have already made the key, but I think if you make the key and all that, you don't really need to explain in words. But still, if you want to write 1 or 2 lines to explain what is happening, that would be helpful. Now, is this clear? Now, why did we not shift the production possibility curve? Because please remember, production possibility curve shifts when there is increase in the production potential or decrease in the production potential. It's not when there is decrease in output. So when recession happens, you move from a point on the curve to a point inside the curve, and when economic growth happens, you move from a point inside the curve to a point towards the curve, right? That is what you need to remember. Change quantity and quality of resources. Exactly. Very good. Excellent. Yes. So it is when there is change in the quantity or quality of resources that your production possibility curve will shift outwards or inwards. Is this clear? Does this make sense? Next question, students. Use figure 2 to compare the general price level in Iceland in 2007 and 2015. Use figure 2 to compare the price level in Iceland in 2007 and 2015. Okay, interesting. So what happened between 2007 and 2015? Is it for 1 mark, 2 marks? How many marks is it for? It's for only 1 mark. So you just need to mention one this. Is the price in 2015 higher than what it was in 2007? Just answer me yes or no. Will the price of Iceland higher in 2015 compared to 2007? That's my question to you. As simple. Abdurrahim, I'm waiting for your response. Okay. Arbab is saying no. What about you? Quickly. Now, students, this is the problem. This is the problem. You guys make this every time. Think about this. Students, the rate of inflation is positive. The rate, please stay with me. Stay with me. The rate of inflation is positive. Is it going anywhere below negative? Is it going anywhere below negative? If it's not going anywhere below negative, this means that there's no deflation. Am I making sense? So there is no deflation. And until unless there is no deflation, prices will not fall. Prices will not fall. Now have a look at this. If I assume in 2006, the price was, now stay with me. If 2006, the price was $100 or whatever the price was, right? In 2007, how much is this rate? Almost 5%. So what is 5% of 100? What is 5% of 100? And I don't understand why is this so that. Right? Okay, so 5% of that is 105. So in 2006, it was 105. Then again, it's higher. The rate is positive. So 12%. You have to find 12% higher of 105. Whatever it is, you'll write over there. Then next year again, it's almost 12%, right? You'll write it down over here. Then in 2010, it's only the rate of inflation that is decreasing. Inflation, by very definition, the very definition of inflation means that the prices are rising. Students, please have a look at this. So if this is your, right, excuse my handwriting. Right? So in every year, this was zero, this was zero. So going upwards, rate of inflation is positive. As long as rate of inflation is positive, it means that prices are increasing. Yes, prices will be increasing at a slower rate. Prices will be increasing at a slower rate, but prices are still increasing. Is this making sense or not, students? It's only when the rate of inflation becomes negative that your prices starts to fall. Right? Is this making sense? So Arbab, please never make this mistake again, right? So first thing that you have to do is that what is written on the x-axis, sorry, what is written on the y-axis, whatever values, right? And make sure that is it going below zero? Is it going negative? Because negative rate of inflation is deflation. And that is when it means that prices are falling. But in this case, you will say since, so how will you answer it for 1 mark? So you will say since prices are increasing every year, since rate of inflation is positive for every year, that's why prices in 2015 will be higher than the prices in 2007. That's all. You don't have to write anything else because this is the art that in case study you have to answer to the point, very much to the point. It was just saying compare the general price level in Iceland 2007 2015. So you'll say the general price level in 2015 is higher, right? Which means prices rose. There's more inflation because the inflation rate has been positive throughout the year, throughout the period, right? We good? Can we move to next question? Okay, now the next question says explain 2 ways in which the value of Corona between the end of 2007 and between the end of 2007 and the end of 2008 might have caused the rise in the rate of inflation shown in figure 2. Shown in figure 2. Okay, right. So 2 ways in which the fall in the value of Corona. Corona is what? Their currency. So they are saying basically in simple words, if there is a fall in the currency, if there's a fall in Corona, right? How could that have resulted in rise in the rate of inflation? 6 marks. So how a fall in your exchange rate would have resulted a rise in inflation? That is what the question is saying. Did you get the question, Irma? How fall in the value, this is what the question is saying for 6 marks. How fall in the value of Corona might have caused high rate of inflation. Okay, now this being said, 6 marks. So we have to explain all possibilities how a fall in the value of Corona might have resulted in higher inflation, right? How a fall in the rate of currency might have caused high inflation. So now you knowing the idea, what can you tell me, right? Explain 2 ways in which the fall in the value of Corona between the end of 2007 and 2008 might have caused a rise in the rate of inflation shown in figure 2. So in simple words, how a fall in exchange rate, how a fall in the value of corona, right, might have caused a rise in inflation. That is what you're supposed to answer. Okay, now what do you think? How weaker exchange rate causes inflation? How weaker exchange rate causes inflation? Who can tell me? Imports will be more expensive. Do you agree with me or not? Will be expensive. Especially imports with inelastic demand, especially imports with inelastic demand. Am I right with this or not? Okay, exports lose price competitiveness, but how is that causing inflation? अरबाब, लेकिन उससे तो ये होगा ना कि आपके एक्सपोर्ट्स कम बिकेंगे, राइट? आपके इंपोर्ट्स कम बिकेंगे, राइट? लेकिन उससे आपका बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट खराब होगा, लेकिन वो डायरेक्टली इन्फ्लेशन तो नहीं करेगा ना। आप मेरी बात समझ रहे हैं? You're very right कि your price competitiveness कम हो जाएगी आपके exports की, and you know there will be less demand for exports in the world, but that will not cause inflation क्योंकि वो चीजें आपके मुल्क में तो नहीं बिक रही ना, वो तो बाहर जा रही है, तो वो तो मसला नहीं है, राइट? लेकिन yes, imported inflation, अब जो मैंने पॉइंट लिखा है उसको आप यही कहते हैं, उसको you call that imported inflation. Imports will be expensive, right? So when your value is becoming your currency, अब क्या होगा? पाकिस्तान की करेंसी वीक हो गई है ना डॉलर्स के अगेंस्ट, आपको पता होगा $1 is buying 172 rupees, right? Now, with this happening, it will cost us more to import something from the USA. It will cost us more to import something from the USA. Am I making sense? Am I making sense? And especially with the inelastic demand. So all the things like oil that Pakistan imports, the military goods, what will happen to the price of those things? Right? Those will become expensive and that can result in inflation. So that's one thing, including raw material, right? Including raw material, because raw material directly contribute to higher prices, including raw material, right? We go on this. Okay. What else could be reason for higher? What else could be an argument? Right. What else? So one reason that we've discussed so far is that because your exchange rate is becoming weaker, now imported goods will cost you more. And with that happening, when you import those things, the prices will rise in your country and that will result in inflation. So that's one thing. What else comes to your mind? So when exchange rate is weak, what will your locals do? Local people will buy more from local currency rather than importing. Local people will prefer to buy local goods because obviously if your exchange rate is weak, this means that imported goods are expensive for you. So what do? You'll buy locally. And when you buy locally, what happens? Demand pull inflation. Are you getting me or not? So just try to relate this with what is happening in Pakistan right now. Just try to relate with what is happening with Pakistan right now, right? Local people will prefer to buy local goods since imported goods have become more expensive due to weaker exchange rate. Am I right with this or not? And when that happens, the demand increases, right? So that results in demand pull inflation. That results in demand pull inflation. Okay, anything else? As imports get expensive, cost of production will increase and firms will increase prices to cover the extra cost. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Okay, what else? Arbab and Abdul Rahim, did you guys get the second point? So think about this. When your exchange rate is weak, right? So think about Pakistan. So our exchange rate against dollars is weak, our exchange rate against pounds is weak. When this happens, This means that for Pakistanis, imported goods are more expensive. And for Pakistanis, imported goods are more expensive. They prefer to buy locally. When they buy locally, what happens to your aggregate demand? We know this entire graph, right? That your aggregate demand curve will shift to the right. So think about it. This was your original aggregate demand, AD1, downward sloping like this. This was your aggregate supply, upward sloping like this. On the y-axis, you have GPL, general price level. On the x-axis, you have real GDP. Now, what will this do? This will cause, so if let's say originally your this was this much, your general price level. Now your aggregate demand with shifting upwards, it would happen, it would go like this, and that will result in higher general price level. This is simple, right? Good. Okay, what else? What could be? So since it's for 6 marks, ideally we need to write 3 points. Since it is for 6 marks, ideally we need to write 3 points. Value, fall in the value of, so we've talked about imported inflation, we've talked about local people buying more locally, and what else? Might have caused high rate of inflation. Can you guys think of any other explanation for this? Right, let's look at the question one more time, right? So explain the factors that determine whether the devaluation, sorry, no, this was not the one. Explain two ways. Okay, so we are good. We have already explained 2 ways. Perfect. I think we are good. So explain 2 ways in which the fall in the value of corona between the end of 2007 2008 might have caused the rise in the rate of inflation, right? So we have already explained 2 ways how weaker exchange rate results in higher inflation. Firstly, your raw material and other things imported from other countries will be more expensive for you, which means higher inflation. And secondly, your locals will not be able to import from other countries, which means that they will be buying local goods. When they buy local goods, the demand for local goods increases. And as I've just shown on the graph, that will result in higher inflation. I haven't finished exchange rate yet, so I can't say more. Okay, fine, no problem. Right now I do not have the marking scheme. I do not have the marking scheme. Just give me a second. This is May, June. I can totally show you, but I'm 110% sure that I did it correctly. A levels economics, right? Economics fast papers. Just a second. May, June 17, May, June 17. So summer 19, 18, summer marking scheme 2. No, this is winter. This winter we need summer, right? Is it summer or winter? Is it summer or winter? This is May, May. Winter. 2. Wow, we don't have marking scheme for 2. Can you believe this? 2. Marking scheme 1 4 3. Here we go. Finally. March. Summer 17. This is summer, right? May, June, right? Okay. So think about this. So for the first part, a clear description showing understanding of the concept production possibility curve with correctly labeled axes and appropriate output choices for an appropriate representative of change in Iceland, right? Blah, blah, blah. As I said, the price is higher in 2015 than in 2007. For the recognition, think about this. For the recognition that a fall in the value of corona will lead to a rise in the price of Iceland's import, one mark, and explanation of how this could cause cost push inflation in Iceland, right? For recognition that a fall in the value of corona will lead to a fall in the price of Iceland's exports, will lead to a fall in the price of export, and explanation of how this could cause demand pull inflation in Iceland. Lead to a fall in the price of Iceland exports, right? An explanation of how this caused demand to inflation in Iceland. The collapse of corona could cause cost push inflation, demand pull inflation as the corona collapses makes imports more expensive. This might feed into increased cost of Iceland companies as they import raw material components. In addition, there might be increase in the cost of living as imports might rise food stuff and so on. In addition, a fall in the corona would reduce the price of Iceland exports and increase the price of imports. That would lead to a rise in net exports, causing inflationary pressures. Yeah, more or less the same thing that we said, right? So it's the same thing, right? So demand pull and cost push. So cost push, we explained that imported goods will be more expensive for you. That will result in cost push inflation, and the demand, local demand will also increase because imported goods will be expensive for you, so you'll buy locally. Okay, I'm sending you the new link.